So if I had done, one before, these clamps would probably be pretty close to where I want them, but I've got one where it's spread way out here, another one tight here, tight, and spread out a little more. So the first thing I'm going to do is just spread them out using the driver. That way I know I'll have at least that 5 inches that I need plus some. So is that going to be enough? Yes. So now I can actually bring those in a hair. Not all the way, I'm not touching, but the rest of it, that way I can use a wrench if I want. Okay, so I'm pretty close on those. Now I'm going to lift that guy up, and then you have to decide where you want to put the glue, right? I'm going to spread it. So generally, on a mortise and tenon or tongue and groove, I personally would put glue in the groove, or in the case of mortise and tenon, in the mortise. And that's because if you put it on the tenon or the tongue, when you push it down, it's going to, if it was touching this side or that side, it's going to get glue all over that. So if you put it in the cavity, then when you put something in it, the only time you're going to get ooze is from having too much glue in there. Or in the case of course, Gorilla Glue, if you have too much in there, it may not show up right away. It may show up later, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to tame the Gorilla. So I'm going to start with Gorilla Glue on this. And my wife asked me one time, "Hey, Mike, how do you get Gorilla Glue off? How do I get Gorilla Glue off my fingers?" My response was, you wait a week and a half, because that's pretty much what's going to happen. So there's the bead that's going to go in there. In taming the Gorilla, you definitely want to use a brush, but one time I bought some, in fact, the place I used to buy all my woodworking stuff at, a woodworking place, specialty shop, one-off kind of place. He all of a sudden decided he was going to go to a different brand of brushes. This is after years and years. Well, I took them home, and I had a major problem with the brush. The Gorilla Glue basically ate the brush within seconds. The bristles were falling out. Now, I do have to kind of correct myself. I thought I was going to use both Gorilla and white, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to rub the edges. Now, what I'm doing is I'm rubbing the edges, so that, because there's a huge amount of holding power there on those 3/8 inch edges. There's a huge amount. And because it's a sideways pull rather than a straight pull out. I'm also being somewhat careful to not get glue on the rest of the wood, but it is what it is. It's not a big deal, because Gorilla Glue is basically stainable, and it's not that bad for getting off, believe it or not. So I'm going to put that there. Careful not to touch anything, right? I'm going to put my piece in there like that. And remember that glue is a lubricant. You may not think of that as a lubricant, but it is a lubricant when it's wet. So everything's going to slide around a lot more. So then I'm going to put that on there. And then I already set my clamps up, so then I can lay it down in there. There's plenty of set time on Gorilla Glue as well, so I can go get something else that I want to get. I'll be back in a minute. If you've been around to some of my other projects, you know I'm a big fan of these clamps. These are the R&R Clamps. And again, I'm not sponsored by anybody and not paid by anybody to say things. I do it because I say something, it's because I truly mean it. But at that said, one of the downsides, and they may have even corrected this because these are older clamps. These are the red ones. The newer ones are black, and I think they're powder coated, so they may be different. But the red does tend to leave a mark on it because you're pushing so much pressure on it, and it's so tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a strip of wood in there, and again I can raise that up to put the pressure basically equal to the center of that. I'm just using my fingers to tighten a couple of those right now, and I'll do the same thing on this. So all the pressure is where I want the pressure, which is right on the center. There's pressure, pressure, right? Going right towards the center. If I didn't do that, I'd have pressure going down at the bottom here, which would pull the top apart. So then I'd have to put even more clamps on the top. So this is the first time I've done this with a full length strip like that. So this one may be the way, part of the whole process of doing it really simple, as simple as it can be done and getting the best results. So all right, it is now the next day, and I am on prototype number 1. So, we used Gorilla Glue, just a refresher, and if you see what was kind of funny, again, the boards that I used on this were scrap. So there was some that I was testing some stuff on a CNC, and so there's all kinds of holes in it. Well, look at, there was a cavity here, there was a hole here, and so it got pretty funky. But again, this is a prototype, so I'm not overly concerned about it. So what I want to do right now is before I take it out of the clamps, I want to do some of the taming of the Gorilla, which is the glue that I used. And so let's just see if I can get a good angle here. Basically, part of the taming of the Gorilla this is huge. This is a hide. Again, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not like an Amazon referral thing or anything, nothing. So the only thing that, I have any association with at all is my threaded tenons, which you're going to see come up, and those are something that I patented and I own. So, but other than that, nothing. So when I say something like this, I mean it. And I've been using this particular scraper for many, many years, probably 15 or 20, on all kinds of projects. Some of them, $5,000, $10,000 woodworking projects, right? And this has always been my go-to scraper, because I don't know why, but for some reason the shape, and it's got to be the red-handled one. It's got to be the bent chisel scraper, extra heavy-duty 3-inch. I tried other ones, and they don't work. But now this is a pretty heavy Gorilla right there. But part of the reason, the layout of the whole project itself, was that of this whole concept of micro beam, or whatever I end up calling it, is that there will be some standards of how this all goes together. Well, the initial one I had was 2.5 inches between here. It looked a little better, it was a little more flexible, but then this didn't fit inside. So these are all things that have just come out collimated over the years and the trials. So, but if you just take a look, like here's a little bit of Gorilla there, right? Right now, it's gone. This is a pretty large one. There it is. It's gone. You gotta be careful. I don't want the dogs to get those. They think it's popcorn. Here's another one. Boom. Just like that. So that's all that's to it. So again, part of the design of the micro beam and this I-beam concept was some spacing that will allow me to use the tools that I wanted to use. Now this one here, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do about that, but I'm not going to really care, right? I won't go into that. So, but if you notice, what I did was, before, I haven't even loosened it from the clamps yet. Now, the wheels on this cart are lockable. I'm going to lock those up. So again, this is a MikroBench. MikroBench, yes, the one that I did on the Instructables. If you haven't seen this before, you haven't been to Instructables, go to Instructables.com and type in, under the search up in the right-hand corner, type in MikroBench and spell it M-I-K-R-O-B-E-N-C-H, all one word, and then it'll pop up a whole tutorial on how to build these. But so this has been mounted on the Harbor Freight, U.S. General crate. Now, the wheels don't really super lock, only two of those lock. But before I did anything, while I still wanted to scrape, I kept them locked into those clamps. Well, now I can undo the clamps, and I'm actually going to flip it after that. And again, on this video, I am covering in more depth some of these functions because it's prototype number 1 of many. And so in the other ones, I won't go into some of these details, but So I'm spending a little more time on it right now. For instance, right now, if you notice, I'm using a wrench to undo those, right? Because they have a lot of pressure on them. The reason they have a lot of pressure is because I used Gorilla Glue to attach the web to the two flanges. So that one's all done. Now this one, there's still a huge amount of pressure on there. If that had been, and I'm a big fan of Bessie clamps, you know, the larger flat type, you know, but I've still had many situations with Gorilla Glue that I couldn't even get the clamp off because you're trying to turn it with your hand, whereas here you have access to that wrench. So if you recall, I put a spacer in there, and that worked out really, really well because again, what I did on the I-beam concept, there's that center eye, the web, and where I put that pressure was only on there, so it killed two birds with one stone. It put pressure where I wanted it, and then it also protected the edge of the beam itself. In the past, I used to always have to sand that off, and so I don't want to be able to have to do that anymore. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over, and again, there's a couple of Gorilla Glue things here, right? So all I'm going to do is just tighten a couple of them. I should put the spacer. I'm not tightening them too much, otherwise I should have put those protectors in there again. But so again, now it makes it so much easier to work the material because I'm not trying to hold that material with. Now here I've got one, and I just had surgery, rotator cuff surgery, so if my surgeon saw me doing this, he'd kill me. But so this is hard to do because of that. Otherwise, it would be actually quite easy. There you go. But you can see how easy that works for taming the gorilla. And there were more oozes on here than there would be, and the reason for that is because, again, there were these holes in this board, and wherever the Gorilla Glue can find some place to escape, it does.